foreign reserve? Foreign reserve is savings by a country denominated in a foreign currency and domiciled offshore. Now, there is really nothing very sacrosanct about it. Now, if I want, let me first bring it to the level of the individual. There is no difference between a nation's reserves and an individual trying to save money for the rainy day. You know, if you want to make it foreign, you could as well put it in a foreign bank. That becomes individual foreign reserve. Now, when you have reserve, why you do that is that in the event of instability in cash flow, in the event of a drop or in your current cash inflow, you can then resort to that foreign reserve to support your activities during the period you have a drop in cash flow. And during occasions when you have a better cash flow, vis-a-vis what you need money for, because you asked me, how do we accumulate? You know, during the period when you now have a better cash flow, vis-a-vis the projects you think you must do, then you can afford to put a little more money in your foreign reserve. Also, like an individual, if you are earning money and in a particular month, you think you don't need to use all your earnings, you can put a higher percentage in a savings account. So that is the way foreign reserves are accumulated. And I say there is nothing sacrosanct about it, because it will be idiotic to the extreme. If you have critical areas of the economy, you can spend money on to drive the economy, to drive economic growth, to drive domestic production, to drive employment, you know, and you say you won't do it because you want your foreign reserve to be very high. It's like a man who has five children to train, and he said, I will train only 2 because I want to have huge savings in the first bank. It doesn't make economic sense. That is not economics. So there is nothing wrong in the foreign reserve going up and down, depending on what the country considers critical at that point that necessitated drawing down on the foreign reserve. If you have a critical infrastructure, for instance, that you think you need to drive the economy, for instance, a railway line that is very critical, or some other things, you know, of course you could draw down on your foreign reserve and finance that critical infrastructure that will enable your economy create jobs and increase your gross domestic product. So there is really nothing wrong in foreign reserve coming down.
Now, Mr. Boyo said something, that in spite of our huge foreign reserve, well, compared to the the earlier days, we are not shielded from borrowing. So, I mean, my immediate thought is, if we have this huge amount, this huge reserve abroad, why are we still borrowing?
Well, I don't know all of those details, because some of those questions will have to be answered by those in government. But I'll put it basically this way.
CBN.
CBN, whoever is in government. Basically this way, that the important thing is, do you have import cover? How long can you import without having a crisis? Because if you don't have import cover, it's unlikely that you'll be able to access all of the international trade guarantees, which makes your trade convenient. So when you have a foreign reserve, it means that you're more likely to be looked at as a country unlikely to default. It means that your trade is more effective. So that's all we can talk about, the need for foreign reserves being high or low. And then you must know how this is built up. Every country goes into what's called trade. So you have a bilateral trade arrangement. Your balance of trade, if you have a favorable balance of trade, then you have more money. If you don't have a favorable balance of trade, then it goes the other way. And very often, like in our situation, we have a product that is in demand, which is called oil. And therefore, with a lot of countries, we have a positive balance of trade. In other words, we export more to them than we import from them. And so that's how that's built up. So like you said, if you
export more from them?
No, they import more from us in terms of money, not the volumes, basically. It's called the balance of trade position.
Because
the balance is
we import almost everything.
Yeah. The balance of trade is so that's how you build up your reserve, based on the balance of trade position.
So, okay, I beg your pardon. Let me just make this point very quickly, that we did make effort to get someone here from the Central Bank of Nigeria, and we were promised that somebody would be represented here in the studio this morning, but he or she, for some reason, has not showed up. We did make the effort to get someone from the CBN to give us exactly government's perspective to all of this.
Yeah, okay. Now, the area one may want to look at is from what Chief has said and what you've said. If we're to look at this issue critically, what are we spending our money on? Because if the analysis from all of you economists and people who understand investment banking and all of these macroeconomics issues is that we're saving for the rainy day, and that's the essence of foreign reserves. And when we have the issue of infrastructure deficit, deficit in housing, agroeconomics that is just growing and is, to some extent, it is blossoming. When we have all of that, how are we spending our money and still able to spare some for this foreign reserve?
Like I already, sorry, you answered the question. Like I already told you, I mean, you must understand, like you also answered the question, you need to have what is called import cover. Unfortunately, we are very an import-dependent country. If you cannot pay for your import, in other words, if you are going to default, you will not get cover from another country. The ECGD will not write off your things. The U.S. import export will not cover you, basically, because if you could default. So if you have some reserve, it's essential that they will look at you as someone who is unlikely to default.
What would be are you therefore saying that every time a Nigerian wants to import something, the country from which the import is coming will look at Nigeria's foreign reserves before they honor that request or whatever?
Very likely. But let me give you. Have you heard of Johnson and Matthey in those days? You see, what we used to do in those days when our country was convertible was that you could buy things for Naira anywhere else. Now, when we had a problem domestically, we was called an import license, which meant that you gave your own local Naira for your imports to the central bank. And the central bank would then pay the outsider the amount of money you wanted to pay at a rate they would determine to control the domestic economy. Now, the situation you had was that people paid their monies into the central bank. But somebody maybe instead of from elsewhere would have switched that payment to someone else. So the money went elsewhere, and the guy who imported to you did not get those things. Now, for as long as this period was being imported, ECGD, for example, would guarantee our money. So they became sovereign debt. And they said, look, we've paid for these things. This money hasn't come. And whereas someone inside Central Bank had already paid money to another account. Now, if you don't manage your position well, in a situation with which you cannot pay what you have paid for, no one will cover you. But you don't have to have large sums of. I just understand the basics. The issue you're talking about is political. I'm not in the government. I cannot determine what risk, how much money they want to risk, what kind of risk. That's entirely
You're saying it is political, but when it comes to the issue of infrastructure deficits and all that, and then we're able to save some money. It's a decision of government. Okay, let me bring it to Mr. Boyer then. When you look at what we're doing in Nigeria as far as management of our economy and the growth and development of it, when you look at that and you see where our foreign reserve is, and then you take a sidestep and look at our issue of foreign currency, which is the dollars that we use quite a lot. How do you feel when you look at the value of our currency rising every few seconds? And as of yesterday, I heard... it's falling every few seconds. And as of yesterday, I understand dollar is about 170, 172. And yet it is looking like it's going to get worse. Pounds is something in the region of about 273, 275 in the black market, or parallel market as they want to call it. And yet we're talking about foreign reserve is also falling, and the economy is said to be growing.
Thank you, Kadi. I said I don't know whether to laugh or to cry because of the misconception of this issue of foreign reserves. What makes our